The first thing I felt was the cold, not the weather one, but rather the feeling of a hand on my arm, stopping me firmly before I crossed the threshold of the church. She was my aunt, my father's older sister, always neat, always strong, and that time, harder than ever. "You shouldn't be here." I thought I hadn't heard correctly, or that it referred to another person, but not. That phrase was meant for me. I had spent hours mentally preparing myself for that moment, the final goodbye. My father's funeral. She had chosen a dark and simple dress. I tied my hair carefully, not out of vanity but out of respect. But all that became absurd in a second. "This is not what he would have wanted," my aunt said. The echo of his words pushed me back, as if I had been punched in the chest. Mom wasn't alive to defend me, and the rest of the family members just watched out of the corner of their eyes, avoiding intervening. I was carrying a bouquet of white lilies, the same ones he used to put on the table every time he visited me in secret. "Don't make a scene, please." That plea was the closing, not from the conversation, but rather an entire stage of my life. I was not welcome at my own father's funeral, and in that moment, I knew that death is not always the most devastating thing. Sometimes what destroys is the rejection of the living. If this story touched you, comment below where you're watching from and what time it is there. I never imagined that the worst moment of my life would also be the loneliest. I always thought that when Dad died, at least I would have the dignity of saying goodbye, even if it was in silence from a bench in the back, even if no one spoke to me, even if everyone ignored me. But they didn't even allow me that. When I was denied entry to the funeral, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't ask for explanations. I stood there, in front of the temple where they were saying goodbye to my father, like an intruder in the story I had lived through. I could hear the singing from outside, and every word, every echo, hurt me like a slap in the face. Not because of what they said, but because of everything they forbade me from saying. I sat down on a bench facing the garden, alone, with the lilies still in her hands, and in that silence I saw him, my younger brother, entering through the front door. He was welcome. He could cry in public. I had to swallow my grief. No one came near. Nobody asked me how I was. Nobody thought that I too was losing something irreplaceable. Because for years, I had been portrayed as the problem daughter, the one who left, the one who didn't call enough, the one who didn't understand Dad. And now, that image condemned me to the bench of oblivion, to be the only one who didn't deserve to be there. The saddest thing was not the death. It was understanding that, for some, I had died long before. From where I was sitting, I could see them coming in and out. Black dresses, dark glasses, carefully measured hugs. Everything was so choreographed that it seemed more like a social ceremony than a real duel. But that wasn't the hardest part. It was seeing my place, empty. That place that, for years, I thought belonged to me. To the right of my father, in the row where he would sit me when we went to Mass on Sundays, where he used to leave me a candy hidden in his coat pocket when I was a child, where she told me in a low voice, "This is our corner." That corner was now occupied by his new wife, a woman I barely knew, which he never fully mentioned, and now she was receiving condolences, as if she had always been the heart of their story. I saw my cousins laughing together, as if the day wasn't so heavy for them. I saw my brother talking to the neighbors, taking pictures with a group that brought flowers, and I saw my aunt crying theatrically in front of the coffin, the same aunt who asked me not to come. I felt a lump in my throat, not out of envy, not out of nostalgia, but because I understood that I was not being forgotten. It was being erased. Every gesture, every averted glance, every distant whisper confirmed it. She shouldn't be here. And in that implicit phrase, I realized that my grief was not only for the death of my father. It was because of the systematic disappearance of everything we once shared. After the burial, I tried to approach, not with anger, not with complaints, just needing to understand. I approached my aunt in the parking lot, when everyone was already putting away the leftover umbrellas and flowers. I just want to know why they wouldn't let me in. She wasn't surprised by the question, as if I had been waiting for her. It's better this way, really. Let's not disturb what's already at peace. That phrase hurt me more than the rejection, because he didn't just deny my presence, he also denied my story. And what about my peace? I told him. He did not respond. He just looked down and murmured, You know what your father was like." Yeah, I knew it. And that's why I was there. Because despite everything, she had loved him. With the absences, with the contradictions, with the prolonged silences, she had loved him more than anyone in that family could understand. But for them, my love was awkward, because it didn't fit into their official version. And then I understood. My silence was convenient. My absence, functional. Because talking about me was talking about the cracks they preferred to hide. But I could no longer remain silent. Not after she had been pushed out. Not after having been invisible when she most needed to be seen. So I decided on something simple, but irreversible. I was going to look for the truth. And this time, he wasn't going to ask permission to find her. Days after the funeral, I returned to my small apartment. Even with the feeling of having a stuck voice, I couldn't cry. I couldn't scream. It only existed with a kind of fog above it. Until I received a box. A messenger left it without saying who it was from. There was no clear return address. Only my name written in that handwriting I would recognize anywhere. My father's. The box wasn't big, not luxurious. It was dusty. It smelled like confinement. And inside, there wasn't much. A few papers, a black and white photograph of us, and a letter, sealed, with my full name written on the cover, as if it were the last time anyone would bother to write it like that. My hands were trembling. I opened it carefully. The paper was yellowed. The words, tense but clear. I know I haven't been a good father. I have no excuses, only misplaced guilt. I failed you when I chose to remain silent, when I let others speak for me. This letter is my attempt not to die completely with you out there. I read each line with a lump in my throat. There were confessions, laments, and above all, truths that no one else knew. He not only knew that I existed, he knew how much I needed it. And yet, she chose to remain silent, out of fear, out of shame, out of cowardice. But now, with that letter, he spoke to me like never before. And finally, I had a voice of his that included me. The phrase that completely pierced me was neither at the beginning nor at the end. She was in the middle of it all, as if hidden among her other sins. Forgive me for what I didn't say in time. And that's when I knew that he, too, carried his own silence. What is left unspoken can also weigh heavily, even to the point of death. Dad wrote in that letter about Sundays, that he thought about calling me, about the birthdays he looked at the phone without dialing, regarding the times he was asked about me, and chose to change the subject, not because he didn't love me, but because I didn't know how to get back into my life without admitting how much I had failed her. Your mother always knew I was weak because of my pride. That's why she was strong. That's why you turned out strong too. I read that line over and over again, as if among the letters I could find a hug I never received. The letter wasn't long, but it contained everything I needed. The confirmation that I wasn't crazy for feeling that something was owed to me, the certainty that my pain had a history, and above all, the right to stop carrying the guilt that he himself did not know how to let go of. I folded the paper carefully. I put it in a box where everything I needed to say was, and that night, for the first time in weeks, I slept. I cried, but I slept, because even though I was kicked out of the funeral, my father, in his last chance, he had opened the door for me. I went back to the cemetery alone, without warning anyone, without expensive flowers or prepared speeches. He had the folded letter inside his coat, and a small, smooth stone that I had kept since I was a child, when Dad gave it to me on a walk and said, "Keep it. Even small things have a memory." I approached his grave like someone entering a place that had been denied him, not because of the rules, but because of the cowardice of others. I sat on the cold marble edge. I opened the letter once more and I read aloud to him, verbatim, not for him, but not for me, because I needed to hear that written voice finally break the silence. "I don't know if you can hear me, Dad," said, "but I did hear you. There was nobody around, only the wind, only the sound of leaves rustling on the gravestones, just me and my grief. And there, amidst so much rejection, I found something new, my place, not the one they tried to deny me in the church, not the one that others used to feign a closeness that never existed, but the place where, at last, she could cry without asking permission, where I could forgive without anyone understanding, where I could remember without pain." I left the stone on the grave, a kind of witness, sealed, and I woke up with my heart more full than empty, because now she knew that you don't need others to recognize you to say goodbye with love. After that day, I never looked for anyone in the family again, not out of spite, but for care. I understood that not all relationships heal with time. Some just get buried, like my father. The difference is that now I knew exactly what I had buried, the desire to be recognized by people who never wanted to really look at me. I was not included in the will. I wasn't invited to dinner after the funeral. They didn't send me sorry messages, and that's fine, because what I needed wasn't in his words. I was in my own world. I went home empty-handed, no inheritances, no objects, without any photographs more recent than those from the 90s, but with the letter, with his own handwriting, with his belated but genuine apology. And that, in my universe, it was worth more than everything they tried to hide from me. I put the letter in a frame, not to display it, but to remind me that the truth, however small, it has the power to break the longest silence. Now I live with fewer names in my address book, but with more peace in my chest. And I learned something that no one taught me in time. You don't need to be invited to a farewell party to heal. You need to be present in your own story. And I, finally, am. I was expelled from the final farewell. They told me I didn't belong, that it was better that way, that silence was more respectful. But what no one understood is that when you are denied the right to cry, they force you to scream inside. For years, I thought something inside me was broken. If they didn't let me in, it was because I wasn't enough. Not enough, daughter. Not dignified enough. Not part enough. But my father, from the silence, wrote to me. And that letter was the key that unlocked me from the inside. Proof that truth does not need witnesses to exist. If you've ever felt left out of a story that was also yours, comment below. I deserve to be there too. And tell me where you're watching this from and what time it is. Because if this happened to you, perhaps it's because you're also looking for a way to reconnect with your truth.